Welcome to episode 151 of TheNecronomicon.com. TheNecronomicon.com is proud to announce that we've partnered with the Horror Writers Association and the Stanley Hotel and Gemma Amore and Laurel Hightower to bring you the official StokerCon pre-party. We want you to join us on May 10th, 2022 at the iconic Stanley Hotel, where horror authors including Stephen Graham Jones, Gabino Iglesias, Haley Piper, Gemma Amore, and Laurel Hightower will be reading some of their works. Additionally, the No Sleep podcast will perform a 1-hour live version of their award-winning horror fiction podcast. There will be meet and greets, ghost hunting, and a lot of drinking with authors. You're not going to want to miss it. A link to ticket information and room packages is available in the liner notes of this episode. TheNecronomicon.com is now a proud affiliate of Libsyn, one of the top podcast hosting networks in existence. See this episode's show notes for our unique promo code to get up to 2 free months of podcasting services with Libsyn. Get your show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Get critical audience-building stats and all the support you need to sound your best. They even do video. Bring your podcast to life and have your voice heard here, there, everywhere with Libsyn. Check our show notes for the unique promo code and get podcasting. Now in their 18th year, Fright Rags has been bringing you the best in horror apparel and accessories since 2003. Offering a wide range of products for your favorite creature features, slasher flicks, and cult classics. Officially licensed collections include titles like John Carpenter's The Thing, The Evil Dead, Creepshow, Jaws, the Halloween franchise, and so many more. Head on over to fright-rags.com. Make sure to sign up for their SMS and email newsletter to never miss a drop. Listeners get 10% off when they use the code NECRO10, all caps, at checkout. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And I don't have a good joke for the beginning of this episode, so I'm going to sit here and manifest one.
And I am Donald Guillory, author, historian, educator, I guess award-winning scholar now. I don't know how it works. Co-host this podcast, and you know what? I want the knife, please. Sorry, I couldn't resist that one.
And today we've captured Dylan Erwin and forced him to come on this show and talk to us about a movie. So welcome to the show, Dylan.
Thanks, guys. You know, I'm really happy to be here. I feel like this is a long time coming, literally, because I think James, you and I talked about it a while ago. But
that happens a lot.
I am so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to talk about The Empty Man, which is such a good movie. And whenever I saw that you were watching it, it just made me smile inside because I felt like, as you said, I manifested that in a way. So thanks for letting me come on.
Of course. Why don't you tell our listeners a bit about yourself, man?
Well, my accolades are they pale in comparison to yours and to Don's. I think my biggest accolade right now is I'm a new dad. Which if I get
congratulations,
thank you. So if I get loopy, it's because I'm dealing with a very small, very cute gremlin of a creature that relies on me completely, as well as a new baby. It's pretty crazy, but I am I'm an indie author. I have a short story collection that I published, as well as an audio drama. I'm also a podcast co-host for 2 vastly different shows. One's called The Millennium Falconers, and it kind of covers Star Wars canon and branches off into all other forms of speculative fiction. Like we're going to cover the Lord of the Rings show, we're going to cover the George R.R. Martin show, but we're also going to cover Star Wars canon books. It's kind of a catch-all podcast for nerdy stuff that I like. And then the other one is called Keeping Up with the Coens, and we're rewatching the fantastic early 2000s soap teen soap, The OC. And we're on season 4 now, and we just kind of chat about the episodes and how secretly it is the best piece of art to come out of the 21st century. But other than that, I guess I practice law too. I'm also a lawyer. That's kind of my side gig. I see myself as a podcaster first, but no, it's great to be here, and I feel like through podcasting, which whenever the pandemic starts, you can either get in shape, learn how to bake, or start a podcast.
We started a podcast.
Heck yeah. I started a podcast, and since the pandemic started, I have had like 5, and I finally whittled it down, and now I have 2. But I just love it. It's so much fun, and I've met so many awesome people through the podcast community, present company included. And so I'm really excited to be here, and I can't wait to talk about this awesome movie.
Fantastic. So why don't you tell us why you picked The Empty Man?
Okay, I picked The Empty Man for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is because I think someone else had already done The Exorcist 3. And I loved The Exorcist 3. But also because The Empty Man came out of nowhere last year when I saw it. It was after it had already been released in theaters and was, streaming on HBO. And one of my buddies, who I trust, we like the same kind of horror stuff. He and I are actually working on a project together right now. But his name's Dylan Cole Black, which I love because I'm Dylan and he's Dylan, but he's like Dylan Black. So he's like it's like Shadow Dylan. So Shadow Dylan tells me,
have him grow a goatee. Yeah,
I need to. But he's like, dude, you have to watch The Empty Man. And I'm like, okay, is that movie that was marketed like a shitty Slender Man kind of knockoff movie, or just not marketed at all? And he goes, yeah, it's nothing like that. It's nothing like that. And he didn't tell me anything else. And so I watch it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is low key one of the best horror movies I've seen in like 5 years, not counting, any Ari Aster movies, because those are on a tier of their own. But this movie was just so interesting, so bizarre, and not at all what I expected. And what I realized is that the more times you watch it, the more stuff you pick up on. And it's so rare these days for you to have that in a movie. I feel like, it's an old standard. It's something that we always used to love. But then as the attention spans of audiences kind of shrank, the desire to have that in a movie also went away. And so The Empty Man, it's like a comfort blanket. And it has everything, it's not without its problems, but it has everything in it that I look for. And I, just like you find out in the movie, I'm just here to spread the word, man. I'm here to spread the gospel of The Empty Man. Because, the more people that are watching it and thinking about it, maybe we can manifest a sequel. But because the source material is there. But I also had no idea. And if you guys, want me to pump the brakes a little bit, but like The Empty Man was actually a comic book before it was made into a movie. And I didn't realize this. I learned after the fact. I kind of had a hint because Boom Studios was involved in the making of this movie.
Right.
But it was 3 comic books. So there's The Empty Man, I think it's Recurrence, and The Empty Man Manifestation. But this, I believe, was just based on The Empty Man proper, the comic from 2014 that Cullen Bunn wrote. And I don't know if you guys know anything about the comic or read anything about it, but it is absolutely nothing like the movie. It's almost like a Lawnmower Man situation where it's nothing like it. It shares a title and kind of a general idea. But the comic itself is actually about like a pandemic, which is eerie because it's written in 2014. It's about the Empty Man disease. And I mean, it's full of, hallucinations, government conspiracy type stuff. But in the end, it kind of felt more like True Detective season 4 than this movie. I kind of look at the Empty Man movie as a cosmic horror type thing, whereas the Empty Man comic was more of a body horror type thing, almost like The Thing. But it was helpful to read it just to see kind of the tradition where it came from, but it is nothing like the movie.
Yeah, I've heard of the comic, but I have not read it, and I didn't know that it was completely different. So that's kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah, I normally go in completely blind on a lot of these. James likes his spoilers. But yeah, as soon as it started, I was like, son of a bitch, it was a comic. And then I was thinking like, no, don't go look at it, because what's going to happen is you're going to ruin your impression of what you're going to see, or ruin it's I liken it to what was that movie that we will never talk about on this show? Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, because it was the same thing where it was, oh my God, this book is talking about X, Y, and Z. This is so great. There's some great metaphors and some great subtext. And then you see the movie, and you're like, what happened to that?
Yeah.
What happened to this? Where I was like, okay, it's a cool action movie, right? But it wasn't anything close to what I wanted to see on film. And so I stayed there waiting. I'm like, maybe they're going to turn it around. Why is Harriet Tubman here? It's like, she wasn't in the book. What's going on?
Did you see? So I kind of had a similar experience with that, but one that I did not have an experience like that. I was actually incredibly pleased with it. Did you see the Pride and Prejudice and Zombies movie?
I completely forgot that came out, and I didn't see it when it came out, and I still haven't seen it now, and I need to go back and watch it.
It's my wife is like many wives are, I believe, a really big Jane Austen fan. She loves Pride and Prejudice, and I, of course, am a really big horror fan. And so we sat down and we both just absolutely loved it for completely different reasons. And very few movies can do that. And so I recommend it. I plug it. I plug Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and Matt Smith is in it, if anyone's a Whovian out there.
Nice.
So that's always a plus.
My wife is like the opposite. So I'm the one that's like, you should watch this romantic comedy with me. And then I end up watching most of them alone. And then I bitch about it to friends, but blame her. So there you go.
Yeah, I think I'm the only person you don't talk to about that, because I'm like, why are you watching The Notebook? Like,
whoa, I don't watch domestic violence movies. I'm talking about like Holiday. Jeez, man. All right. Anyway.
I just mean anything Nicholas Sparks is, we talk about anything as horror. Having me go watch a Nicholas Sparks movie is horror in itself. Like, that's it's like when on the A-Team, I'm going to age myself here. It's like every time they tried to get B.A. Baracus onto a plane, they had to drug him. Like, that's the way that you're going to be able to get me to go and watch any Nicholas Sparks movie. And that's nothing against him. It's just not.
Challenge accepted.
I'm not into it.
Well, after this, surprise, we're actually not talking about The Empty Man. We're talking about Nights in Rodanthe. And it is my favorite horror movie of the last 25 years. Oh, my gosh. But so do you guys want to talk about this dope movie?
I mean, I guess we could, if that's why you're here.
I mean, I'm here for a number of reasons. Like on this podcast and on this earth, but I'm mostly on this earth now, I feel like, to talk about The Empty Man. I've started doing this in my head, and a lot of my friends apparently are doing the same thing, but I kind of look at The Empty Man in two different ways. So one, I look at it as an absolutely stellar 20-minute horror short film during that really long opening sequence before the credits.
Right.
And then I look at it as a 136-minute opus of existential dread. But I've kind of broken my analysis down into the 20-minute horror short and then the movie as a whole. But, I mean, just right out of the gate, how did you all, like, I feel like it's been so long since a movie has just like had the balls to wait that long before saying, oh, by the way, you're watching, this is the movie title. I know Nolan does it. Christopher Nolan waits until the very end of his movies to do it because he's Christopher Nolan. He's, Terrence Malick for bros. But I can't think of another movie that has done what The Empty Man did, where it's like, no, we're going to have an ice cold open that lasts for 20 minutes that could be its own short film. And then we're going to actually get into the movie.
There are only two movies I can think of, and this is always the one that comes to the top of my head, which is The Departed, where they do that for a good bit. And it might be around the same time as far as the 15 to 20 minute mark. And then it wasn't until I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where Tarantino waited until the end of the movie to give you the title. And when I was in the theater, I was like, son of a bitch. Like, he got me. Like, I sat here waiting for, the title to come up, and he waited until the very last moment of the movie to do it. But no, I mean, that was a great device for them to put into this, because then you get that bookmark, right? You get that bookmark between, or that chapter break between those stories, to where you get enough of the background of whatever's going on to throw you off.
Yeah.
But enough to where when it gets brought back in the main film, you go like, oh my God, that makes sense. Okay, I was wondering when they were going to make a connection between, the group that was in Bhutan and what's taking place now, 23 years later.
Yeah.
So it was a really good thing to employ to get that in the audience's head, or at least bring them back to that, where you start questioning a lot of things. You start questioning when they start talking about reality is not real. You start questioning the stuff that you saw in the film, and you're like, well, I never saw anything come of those people who, because even when we bring in our main character, my initial thought is, okay, well, maybe he was Paul, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
Was, or Greg, I can't remember which one, but maybe that was him.
Yeah.
And no, he'd be a lot older. But then again, maybe this is, he's just changed so much. And you start thinking about all these, what you saw versus what actually happened, like any type of optical illusion or magic trick or anything that's going on. I kept waiting. I'm like, there's something else going on here. And I think they did a good job in pulling your attention away from it enough with the other story to when they bring it back in, there are so many more questions that you're now flooded with.
Yeah, it reminded me of spoilers for The Sixth Sense. I'm sure everyone's seen it anyway, but it reminds me of just the expert way they give you the answer right at the beginning, but then your brain just doesn't allow you to think about it. Like there's a story. I dated a gal in high school, and her kid sister watched the movie. She was like 7 at the time or something like that. And they were watching it like all as a family. And, Bruce Willis gets ganked. He gets shot by this crazy dude. And then he's just sitting there in the next scene. And the 7-year-old turns to mom and dad and goes, "But wait, I thought he was dead." And it's just like, we need to view stories with the innocent eyes of children. Is what I think that story tells me. But I mean, this whole opening is just, I don't remember. Did we get a date card at the beginning? Because I know whenever the
95.
movie, okay,
it was 92 or 95.
Okay,
I think it was 95.
But so maybe it's just because I just watched this documentary. But have you all watched the folk horror documentary on Shudder?
No, I need to get back on there because I'm behind on a few things. What was the name of it?
I think it was called Woods Dark and something. I've literally just been calling it the folk horror documentary on Shudder, but I watched it here. I'm going to pull it up on my.
I still have that 3-hour one. I that's in my queue, I need to find at least a little.
Oh yeah, that's it. It's the Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched: A History of Folk Horror.
Woodlands Dark, Days Bewitched. Okay.
And so the reason why I bring this up is because obviously I have folk horror on the mind, because after you watch that documentary, I just end up going through and watching the unholy trinity of Wicker Man, Blood on Satan's Claw, and Witchfinder General. So I'm in that mindset when I'm watching Empty Man for the second time, and I didn't realize it until this viewing that the short story, the 1990s portion of the movie, it almost feels like folk horror. Because the big deal with folk horror is you have these Christians, these normal people, quote unquote, these wasps,
right, that
are going out into this idyllic countryside, and they're confronted with something wholly abnormal. It's something that their Christian faith doesn't protect them from, their modernity doesn't protect them from, because it's these entities that were ancient when Christ walked the earth. Like, you cannot prepare yourself for, and that's what the folk horror kind of tension is. And I mean, I feel like when I was watching it this time, through the lens of that documentary, that this feels like folk horror, because I mean, it's the West versus the East. You know, the Western tradition, the Western ideology. You know, right out of the gate, whenever that whole truck of Buddhist Tibetan monks go by, and they have just these plain, just kind of glassy looks on their face, these alien looks on their face, and you feel the same way that our four hikers feel, where it's just wholly alien. You don't know what's going on. And that's a lot of the tension, I feel like, obviously, at the beginning of this movie, is first of all, we don't know what they're doing there. We don't know what the purpose of the trip is. We just know that they're there, and they very, very quickly get in over their head.
Right.
You know, when Paul takes a tumble and he you know, he hears whispering and he does what you should never do, and he follows the whispering. He falls down into a crevice. He meets my personal hottest man of the year, the empty man skeleton, that I wish I knew more about him, because he was my favorite. And, you know, he of course, Greg tries to save him, and he hits him with the, "If you touch me, you'll die," which is an amazing thing to say if you don't want someone to bother you, like at the bar or something like that. Just, "If you touch me, you'll die." It's not me, it's the empty man.
Right.
But I love how it goes 0 to 100 real fast. And one thing that this second viewing really had me looking for is kind of common symbols throughout the movie. And I didn't quite realize it until this viewing, just how many bridges there are in this movie. You know, the big bridges that you have, you know, are obviously the one right at the beginning that they have to walk across.
Right.
You have, of course, the bridge where we first meet our protagonist. He's running across the bridge. And then you have the bridge, you know, that his alleged wife and son fly off when they crash the car. And that's the thing about this movie. And that's the thing about a second time viewing this movie, is you're rewarded by paying close attention. But I don't want to get too far off track. And I told James that I would try and do this chronologically because I didn't want to be chaotic. Because if I didn't have notes, I would just be like, oh, I would be that guy that you went to college with that would just smoke pot and talk about MK Ultra all the time.
Yeah, but
That's a
but we
different
liked
podcast.
him.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah,
We
that's
liked him. What's wrong with that?
Oh, he's a great guy. He's just not the best podcast guest.
That's true. Brian, you can't come on the show. All right, go ahead.
But although I'm sure that y'all listening, you've watched it, just to make sure that I'm keeping our signposts, I kind of like to quickly go through the broad strokes of what's going on with the plot, just so you can know where we are. So they bring Paul back to a expertly crafted cabin that has goats surrounding it. Anytime there are goats, I'm in. And so I specifically wanted to mention that I'm really happy there are some goats at this cabin. I don't know who's taking care of them. Maybe it's the empty man or the other, but they take him to the cabin. He's sick. He's not having a good time. He's non-responsive. He is walking around at night maybe and whispering into people's ears the nonsense that I still don't know what he's saying. I do know that I have some friends that actually listen to some of the podcasts I'm involved with as they go to sleep. And so that's how I imagine in my head now that it feels. It's me in their ear just whispering, you know, so
you know what? You should just do a whole episode just like that.
Just
think of all the things you can manifest that way.
Oh my gosh. It's like that episode of Dexter's Laboratory where his tape gets stuck on it's like a French tape. And he gets stuck on omelette du fromage, you know, cheese omelet. And so the next day, it's all he can say. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to manifest some omelette du fromage.
Hell yeah.
But so as Paul continues to get worse, we kind of see this quote unquote sickness manifested in the other people in the cabin. And we get our first glimpse. And this is kind of my first big question for you all, knowing what we know about this movie. The guy who I'm calling Ragman. When one of the gals, hears something outside and of course follows the sound because it's a horror movie. You got to do that. She goes outside and she sees this rag man, the guy in black rags, mimicking her movements, chasing after her. You know, initially when you see that, you think, oh, that's the empty man. That's whatever that guy is. But I mean, on this viewing, I don't think that's the case because as I understand it, The empty man is just, your bridge, your vessel through which he's just the prophet of the other, and the other communicates. The between one communicates through the empty man. So when we see this rag guy, we see him multiple times. Is this supposed to be this otherworldly entity that is communicating through the empty man?
I mean, it definitely makes more sense at the end of the film when there is that discussion of, revealing who our main character is, as far as like he actually is supposed to be the empty man, or at least is going to be that vessel.
Way to ruin it for me.
Hey, yeah, by the way, Bruce Willis is dead the entire time.
Yeah. Well, no, I only watched Stir of Echoes.
But no, it makes sense, because if you look at even that transition, I know we're going to jump ahead, but that transition where the rag man shows up and then, puts his being into his body. I mean, it goes with, I guess you could understand it as this is a way of, I guess, bridging those worlds. I mean, since you brought up the bridges, bridging those worlds of the beyond and the real, or that black void and whatever the reality is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, because, when you initially see it, and it's something I love about this movie, that this movie is a bunch of different types of movies in one. Mm-hmm. You can watch this movie purely as, don't sit on a bridge and summon the empty man, or he's going to come and, you have 3 days. It's one of those movies if you want it to be. And if that's the kind of movie you want it to be, you can pretend that Rag Dude is the empty man. It's fine. That's totally a valid viewing. But I feel like, when I watched it the second time, I went from identifying that guy as the empty man to, no, this is the big bad. This is the guy who needs an empty man to communicate through. And I gotta say, I do absolutely love the use of the bridge there. So Don, thank you so much. But
oh no, you started it, man.
but so we'll get to the end of this short, and it ends pretty abruptly. Paul goes and decides that he's going to do a little bit of a for his morning constitutional, he's going to walk back to the crazy Tibetan bridge. And just sit there and be creepy. And it turns out the girl who he was whispering, in her ear, he's gotten into her head. He's given her the disease. He's manifested something evil within her. And everyone gets killed except for Paul. We have some really, really excellent just stabbings, throat slittings, suicide stuff. It's really effective how they do this. And again, just so ballsy that you see the influenced one falling into the crevice. You see Paul blowing again on his fun little empty man peace pipe, his leprechaun whistle, if you will, and then all of a sudden the credits go up there, and maybe someone in the theater is like, "Oh, okay. Oh, we're watching The Empty Man. Okay, now I know which movie my boyfriend dragged me to."
This
isn't The Notebook.
Yeah, by the way, that's always something I wonder, that if at any point in history someone sits through, like one of the Christopher Nolan movies, sits through the entire movie, and then like the title comes up at the end and they go, "Oh yeah, okay, that was it. I thought that was it." Batman was in it, so I thought it might be Batman Begins. But so now we have our main storyline. That at first doesn't seem connected at all to the previous storyline. And I didn't pick this up until the second viewing, but the first time we meet La Sombra, he is running across a bridge. That's the first time we see him. And that just opens up right out of the gate. And let me just get down on this bridge stuff real quick, because I feel like this is really important. So we know a big player in this movie is the Pontifex Institute. So I looked up Pontifex because I was like, that word, it sounds like pontiff. What is the connection here? Mm-hmm. So a Pontifex was in ancient Rome a member of a council of priests. Then under the Republic, they actually rose into prominence under a Pontificus Maximus, or a supreme priest. It's actually the word Pontifex is from the Latin term meaning bridge builder. It's where we get the word pontiff whenever you refer to the Pope as the pontiff, because, you know, the Pope, in a way, is like the Catholic empty man. He's the vessel through which, you know, God and everything would flow. And so, this importance of bridges is in the name of the Institute itself. And you hear that time and time again throughout the movie. But I just wanted to get that out of the way because that really, really kind of informs my understanding of kind of the movie's end game. But so like I said, we meet La Sombra. He's running. He's clearly dealing with some tragedy. We later find out that his wife and son were in a car accident, and so he's kind of a down on his luck former detective turned private investigator. We have an amazing awkward scene at the very beginning where he brings a birthday coupon and has a birthday dinner with himself, which, knowing what we know by the very end of the movie, that is beautiful and ironic that it is in fact his birthday. The first day that he ever existed, which I absolutely love. So after he eats dinner or his birthday dinner, he goes back home. We meet another important character. Her name's Amanda. We get some solid exposition. I don't usually love exposition in movies, but when it's done like this, I don't mind it. I pulled a couple quotes that I thought were fascinating from Amanda. Nothing can hurt you because nothing is real. I think Don mentioned that at the beginning. And then she said, "What's real starts up here," and she points to her head. So she's already talking about tulpas just right at the beginning. Big power of positive thinking and self-help vibes. But I had not heard about the tulpas and the concept of tulpas. I think the first time that I had actually heard about it was in Twin Peaks: The Return, and then in this. But how much did you all know about tulpas before this?
I actually know quite a bit about them. I was working on a book about tulpas at one point, and I haven't been able to make it work. But so I'd read too much about them and had a friend who was really into them. But it's one of those things that I wouldn't expect anyone else I know to know anything at all. And I wouldn't say that I know as much as I did, because this is 4 or 5 years ago now. So it's one of those things that kind of came and went, how as research has a tendency to do. Mm-hmm. But
yeah, and I know very little about it other than the whole manifesting and the whole idea of, almost like existentialism, as far as my understanding of it, as far as, something exists because you believe it exists, or something can't exist unless you believe for it to exist. And not to pull, Rene Descartes, but the whole that I am there. I think therefore I am, or whoever said it, I can't remember. Descartes is given credit for that or not, but just very limited on my end with respect to that.
Yeah, no, it's. I remember it was a point that they brought up, like I said, in Twin Peaks, and then I kind of went down the wormhole or the rabbit hole. I'm not sure which animal has the more appropriate hole. And I'm sure that little piece of dialogue is going to be snipped and used against me in some way.
Would I do something like that when it wasn't Don that said it? My goodness.
Yeah, you probably would, dude.
I absolutely would.
But the thing is, you just send it to that person.
I might send it to Josh Ickes as well. All right.
And then he'll send it to everyone. That's how, it's thought plus concentration plus time equals flesh. So I don't know what this is going to create. It's going to create some sick tulpa that is going to then run for office. It's going to be weird.
So just to summarize where we're talking about animal holes and how to bring out the flesh.
And that it takes time and concentration, as all good things in life do. But so we meet La Sombra, and it turns out that this girl Amanda, she ends up going missing. And La Sombra is really good friends with Mandy's mom. I believe her name is Nora. And we find out later that they were very, very close friends. They knew each other biblically. And so there's kind of a great tension there with that relationship. But as the former detective turned private investigator, Sombra now is like, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna find out what's going on with these kids. Very cavalier throughout the entire movie about interfering in a police investigation.
No fooling.
I was like, there was that one scene finally where he goes to the cabins where the guy's like, I'm trying to figure out, if you screwed up this investigation beyond all recognition. I'm like, that's the conversation you have at the beginning when you have someone who's not a police officer interfering.
Right.
It's like, what are you doing? Those are the real empty men, is those members of the PD that are just like, yeah, whatever, do our job for us. But
that guy will make a great addition to the DOJ one day.
But we kind of pivot once these kids go missing, or excuse me, once Mandy goes missing, and Lasombra is going around, and I don't know why I keep calling him by his last name. I think it's because there was a note that I saw on IMDb that said Lasombra is Spanish for the shadow, which is fun and might hint to the film's endgame. But Lasombra is going around. He's trying to figure out where Mandy went. Nora's distraught. Don't know where my daughter is. So he starts talking to all of Mandy's friends. And it turns out Mandy and company were, of course, on a bridge. Mm-hmm. And they were taking advantage of the empty man legend. And you guys might need to help me out with this. I'm not sure exactly like what the rules are. Like, I know what the Candyman rules are. I know what the Bloody Mary rules are. And make sure I don't say Candyman 3 more times now.
Or Beetlejuice.
But
Beetlejuice.
Well, he's fine. Beetlejuice? Oh God, we gotta stop. But I'm trying to figure out. So you sit on a bridge, you blow into a bottle, you make the whistling sound, and then you just think about him. Is that all you do? You don't have to say anything?
That's pretty much all they explained, which I thought was strange as well, because is it one of those things where you really have to think about them in order to manifest their spirit, kind of like what some people would believe with prayer and things like that, where you can't just think about it, you actually have to concentrate, because it didn't make any sense to me, because you see how peer pressure plays in, where one of the friends is reluctant, and for a while she's the only one, so I'm thinking like, oh well shit, she wasn't thinking about the empty man when she did it. She just blew into the bottle, and then I realized I was wrong.
This is kind of, I don't want to say plot holes, because this film is perfect and it has nothing wrong with it at all. This is the other part I was trying to figure out, like how this summoning of the empty man, 3 days, all of this stuff plays into what we actually know is going on. Mm-hmm. And I have a theory, and the theory is it really doesn't. It's just kind of what happens, around any idea. It's an urban legend that grows up around anything that's going on, especially since we know that at least Mandy was involved with the Pontifex Institute, with the cult. And so maybe the Pontifex Institute started this whole story about the empty man and about what's going on, just so they can get more people thinking about and manifesting. And since Mandy is kind of their girl Friday, she's out there with the youth. She's the youth outreach of the Pontifex Institute. That's the only thing I could think about, is maybe that's why she was doing it, to try and get the empty man on everyone's mind. But this is kind of where the comic and the movie butt heads in a way, because this whole idea of people dying, the empty man made me do it, and murdering and this and that, that's kind of comic stuff, but it doesn't seem like it really makes sense for what they're trying to accomplish as a cult. Mm-hmm. But I'm not in the cult, so I don't know what their literature says. So I could be completely wrong, but no matter what, they apparently summon the empty man. So that's not good for them. Lasombra continues to kind of look around to try and figure out if he knows where Mandy is. There's this excellent scene where I think it's Lisa's house that he goes into, and there's a movie playing on the television. I couldn't figure out what movie it was. I thought it was 10 Commandments, but I'm not sure. But there's a great bit of dialogue where one of the guys in the movie is saying, why are you running away? What's going on? Why did the troops run away? And the other guy says, well, God is coming. And the other guy says, well, who's God? What God are you talking about? And they say, his God. And I loved how I feel like they intentionally chose that soundbite, talking about how this other God is coming, this God that they know nothing about. And, the Ragman God, really like that. So, Empty Man shows up, we think. And the kids have an adverse reaction, a fatal allergic reaction, you could say. One of the side effects is they all commit group suicide and hang themselves under the bridge. Mandy was not there, so of course La Sombra is pretty excited about it. But almost all of them are dead now, except for the one gal who kind of was helping La Sombra, was telling the story. And her death scene in this movie is one of the, like, my favorite, most intense, most effective scenes in the movie, and that's the steam room stabbing. One thing this movie does very well, they do it first in the 20-minute short film at the beginning. They do it again on the bridge with the kids, and then they do it very effectively in the steam room. This movie makes you focus. It makes you look really, really intently for something, and sometimes there's nothing, and then sometimes there's I don't love jump scares, but this was a very, very effective jump scare with the white walls, the white steam, and then just the black robes and black rags, and just this crazy death scene where at first it looks like she's being murdered, and then there's a quick flash, and it's just this girl stabbing herself over and over in the face with scissors. How did you guys feel about this first pretty intense death scene in the movie?
It's my favorite scene in the whole film. I love everything about how it's shot, and I think that it's the thing that, okay, I have an attention span problem, so slow movies piss me off and bore the shit out of me. So when something like that suddenly happens after I'm kind of like, oh my God, I'm going to check out soon, it was amazing. And I think that it really works, that juxtaposition of how slow it has been, but it's also very symbolic, because when it's slower and atmospheric and dread, it's more everybody. And when it's one person, it hones in and kills. Oh, and I think that that's a really cool thing that it pulls off. Don, what do you got?
Yeah.
Oh, man. This scene, it was kind of the same thing. I kept waiting. I'm like, I mean, like I would just mention a minute ago about how Devara's, I wasn't sure if she participated in the same ritual as everybody else. Mm-hmm. But then you get to that part where, it's almost like a horror cliche, like somebody's going to take a shower, the bad guy's going to show up. Mm-hmm. This person's going to die. They're all by themselves, which again, I thought was weird because you're in a spa, right? Because at first I thought, she was going to her swim class again or swim competition, like she mentioned earlier. But I'm like, well, okay, she was at spa. There's nobody else there. This was completely, it was darker than I expected a spa to be. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm an expert on going to spas, but all the ones that I've been to, they're not dimly lit. They're a lot brighter. But when she started to disrobe and get in the shower and stuff, or into the steam room area, I'm like, oh, damn it, she's gonna die. Mm-hmm. But I was expecting a number of different ways. From all the movies that we've seen where, it could have been an uncontrollable steam valve. Or I just binged the Final Destination movie. So it could have been, there's an electrical short and she's electrified or whatever. So I'm just sitting there waiting, like, what's going to happen? And then all of a sudden you just see that entity with the scissors and everything. And I'm like, oh, that was cool. That was awesome. And then I see that flash of, oh, she's actually doing it to herself. That's even better. That is such a cool twist on this, to where it's not something that as a viewer, you see the person being hunted down. What you see is the person is being, I guess, corrupted from the inside, right? Mm-hmm. To where the reality that we're presented with is not reality. And again, it made me think back to, what was her name? Amanda. When Amanda made that comment about nothing is real, right? And reality is I can't remember if she said reality is what you make it, or reality is based off your perspective or whatever. But just the idea that the reality that is presented in so many parts of our lives, or at least the reality that we consume, is not the reality that actually is. And I think I've seen, and I'm sure you two have seen this as well, but you've seen those different perspectives on things, and different movies have done it. Psychology courses have done it as well, of, presenting an image to someone and then asking them to describe it, or asking a room full of people to describe it. And you get, depending on how many people are there, 20, 30, 40 different reactions to that image, because they're using whatever bias that they have, whatever background that they have, in order to make sense of what they see in that image or in that video or whatever it is. So, being horror people, we're looking at them like, oh yeah, big bad guy's going to do it. And then you're like, oh,
yeah,
cool twist that I didn't have to wait for.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, I feel like this scene can really encapsulate what I like about this movie. Is I hate this phrase. I hate it so much, but I'm going to use it. It really subverts my expectations.
Okay.
And especially when you think about, I kind of joked about this earlier, but whenever I saw this movie coming out, whenever I heard, oh, The Empty Man's coming out, you see the poster, and the entire movie is a subversion based on what it was marketed as. And not hating on Slender Man or creepypastas and stuff like that. I mean, there's a time and a place for those kind of things. I just wasn't in the mood for one. But this whole movie it came out of nowhere and is doing some really, really unique stuff. And I really like it. And I really like the your whole approach to the psychology of it. And it always reminds me of that old adage where they talk about, you have a group of blind men and they're trying to describe what an elephant is. And the one who's touching the trunk says one thing. The one who's touching the ear will say an elephant is another thing. And it's just so cool. And that's something the horror genre does so well. I feel like the horror genre, if you didn't call it horror, you would just call it psychology. That's all it is. And that's actually one of the ways that I've convinced my wife to watch so many horror movies. Is I remember we binged The Haunting of Hill House. I'm a big Mike Flanagan fan, and we binge that. And the way she doesn't really love kind of possession kind of stuff like that. And so the way that I can market it now, which is the truth, it's not deceptive at all, is, well, this movie is really an increased meditation on mental health, and the effects of mental health. And when the Babadook came out, it's like, yeah, it's a creepy monster movie, but it's also about postpartum depression.
I was going to say, it's about who's the creepy monster.
Yeah, it's so cool. And this is why, oh my gosh, this is why I feel like so many horror movie podcasts tend to be longer. The episodes are longer because there's just so much to talk about. But I will resist that urge to just continue beating this, I guess, dead elephant, to continue the metaphor. One of the things that you just said actually goes back to what I was saying about tulpas earlier. The book I was looking into making is about tulpamancers. And I don't know if you know anything about tulpamancers, but it very closely ties in with schizophrenia and one of the ideas, the one that I was leaning towards, anybody can use this because I'm not writing it. I don't care. But it's about literally creating a person in your head. So you keep talking to it when it's not there, and you keep talking to it until it talks back. And then as you get to know each other, once it's there, it keeps growing, and then it becomes its own entity. And how that plays into multiple personalities, dissociative disorder, how it plays into everyday life and how we present ourselves in different ways. And I don't know, all of that is so fascinating to me. So if you're going to keep going down the wormhole, I will refrain from the joke here. That's a great place to go. That's all I'm saying. So there you go. Tulpamancers. No, I love it. And Tulpamancer, first of all these phrases and all these words sound like they would be absolutely amazing names for black metal bands. And so even if I don't write a Tulpamancer thing, I am going to for sure do a doom sludge metal band, and we will be called Tulpamancer.
Sweet.
And I will give you credit for it. But
awesome.
So
mine's called Don Guillory and the Don Guillory Band, but he's suing me and I'm not allowed to talk about it more.
If you need legal representation, call me. And that wasn't solicitation, listeners. That was not. So
I chose the wrong time to take a drink.
So basically now, if my count is correct, everyone except for Mandy is dead. And Mandy is just missing. Everyone on the bridge. So things kind of get kicked up into high gear for Lasombra. And he's in the process still of peeking around, trying to report things, looking for things. He finds a flyer, I believe it's in Mandy's room, for the Pontifex Institute with the word Tulpa written on the back. So, that's a little fun little clue that we've already been discussing, but that maybe first-time viewers were seeing it like, what the hell is a Tulpa? And then they do exactly what Lasombra does, and they get on Wikipedia and they look up both Pontifex Institute as well as Tulpa, and we find out. Googling. Oh my gosh, yeah, the Google I'll do rabbit. It'll be rabbit hole. The Google rabbit hole, and they have this really kind of brief shot of the actual fake wiki page for the Pontifex Institute, and you find out that there was a history of Pontifex in Bhutan, in specifically the Ura Valley in Bhutan. So finally, if the ragman showing up again and killing someone or causing someone to kill themselves wasn't a tie-in enough to that first 20 minutes, we now have a direct reference to the location from that first part. So the threads are starting to weave together. But this Wikipedia search causes Lasombra to go and seek out the Pontifex Institute, and he finds them housed in a Scientology-looking building. And he walks in and he's given a questionnaire, and I wrote down some of these questions on the questionnaire just because I love them so much. It's kind of like a choose your fighter. So pick your favorite one, but the ones that I love the most. You
should hand it out to people at Imaginarium while you're there with us, and force them to answer the questions for you.
Yeah, I know of about 5 people who answer those questions. One definitely is guaranteed to answer.
I couldn't resist. Go ahead.
So there are a couple of these. I'm assuming they're true or false questions. We don't see the true or false section, but there are phrases like the brain can itch. Life itself is a kind of disease. The scientific method is a tool of oppression. So these are both amazing questions and amazing titles for Fall Out Boy songs.
Well, they also could be part of the new Texas curriculum. So.
Yes, I am an avid science denier, and I take offense to that comment. No, but I love this so much. Just these random questions, and I really wish. I'm sure that if this movie had either done better or if it was marketed and I just didn't see it or what the deal is, I wish they would send these out. This would be a perfect marketing thing for this movie, is sending out these fake Pontifex Institute questionnaires. But we find out where most of the money in the budget went in the very next scene, where our boy Stephen Root is shown to be a very, very higher up guy in the cult. And he has a series of wonderful quotes, but the one that I loved more than others was he said, "There is only the great binding nothingness of things." And I love that. That's like something I would write like on my Trapper Keeper in high school. But it's such a cool idea. And the thing that Stephen Root does so well, and I guess it's both Stephen Root as well as David Pryor, who wrote and directed the movie, is the things that Stephen Root is saying. I don't remember his actual character name, so I'm just using his actor name. The things that he says, I mean, they're weird, they're out there, but they make perfect sense. And I think we kind of maybe see Lasombra starting to give into it a little bit before, of course, saying, screw this is crazy. But I thought that was really, really effective. What were you all thinking kind of about the direction of the movie, about the plot, about the end game at this point, when you actually find out it is in fact a cult?
I'm going to defer to James because I want to hear what he has to say before I throw out my stuff that's probably going to get me in trouble.
All right. So, I mean, number one, I read spoilers going in. So,
yes.
Come on. So progression of story-wise, I absolutely love this. I love the little comment he makes, like, "I'm glad that you're back," or whatever he says exactly. Yeah. That's beautiful. What I want to talk about with him, though, is so much weirder, and it's this continuation of one of my favorite characters of his ever. In Get Out.
Yes.
Stephen Root has my favorite character in Get Out.
Yes.
And you can listen to our episode on that to get my rant about him literally not seeing color. But I think it's so interesting that Parsons is a continuation of that same character in some ways. He fits that same mold, and it's also a vessel for a different soul, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so tied in, but my brain couldn't let go of that. So I think I didn't take what I was supposed to take from it at all, but instead I ended up in this weird place where I was like, this is a continuation. It's all part of the plan. The Get Out is part of the empty man. And
it's the great binding nothingness, dude.
So that's where I ended up.
So you're saying that Jordan Peele changed his name to David Pryor to write this movie, just so he could cast Stephen Root?
No, I'm saying the Empty Man used all of them.
It's canon now. It's canon. That's actually
the Empty Man used Jordan.
Yes.
So.
Hey,
oh
man!
My God.
You got to do what you got to do to get an Oscar. I mean.
All right, Don. What do you got on this?
All right. This was the first thing I wrote down. I said, "Oh, cult shit," and so I wrote down.
Dude, I wrote down cult shit too in my notes. It literally says cult shit. That is perfect.
I did not, but I could write it down right now.
We manifested it. Now we're gonna get James to write it down too.
That's right.
But no, I wrote down as soon as I saw it, I was like, Scientology. I'm surprised they don't have their own TV network, just like the Church of Scientology does. But then I also put down, this is what you see with any type of cult behavior, whether it's religion, MLMs, politics, sports, whatever, right? You sometimes have people say something that sounds profound, but it's just bullshit.
Yeah.
So if I walked up to somebody and I simply said, there is nothing but the unknowing, or the only thing that exists is non-existence, I could go on all day saying like these things that really it means nothing. Like there's nothing that could go. I've expressed to my wife that if I ever get the urge, I'm going to start my own cult, because I watched enough documentaries, I've watched enough movies to realize all I have to do is say some shit that sounds smart.
Yeah.
And then immediately start questioning all the stuff, or making people question all the stuff. You know what? Why do you work a 9-to-5 job? You were not made to be on this planet to work for someone else.
Where do I sign up?
We should be working together to build our own community. Meanwhile, I'm going to go live in the big house. You guys live in the cabins, because you have to continue on with your struggle, because you haven't reached the same level as me yet. But no,
when do we chant "lock her up"? All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Butter emails.
No, you have to do the lock her up chants right before you start with that nonsensical "Let's go Brandon" chants, which
Yeah,
I don't.
Right?
Hey, we're not going to alienate any of our fans, any of our listeners, because you know what?
If they don't know I hate Trump by now, this must be their first episode.
Whenever I saw someone wearing a "Let's Go Brandon" NASCAR shirt at a restaurant the other day, and he was with all of his small children, and it took everything in me to not walk up and say, "Hey, who's Brandon? What does that shirt mean?" And just make him tell me in front of his children, because unlike them, we're not afraid to hate on Biden openly.
Right?
It's called holding people accountable.
Yeah. It's like, it's democracy, bro. Hiding behind "Let's Go Brandon." Get out of here with that nonsense.
I just really want a shirt that says "buttery males."
Buttery male.
Because they're always chanting about buttery males, and I don't know what their obsession with butter-covered men is, but they cannot shut up about these buttery males, and so
I'd buy it.
I know more.
I'd buy it, and we could all wear one at the con and pass out questions about if people's brains are itchy. It's gonna be great.
At the con I'm constantly trying to secretly push you to go to. Yes.
No, here's what we should really do. Someone brings in, I can't believe it's not butter, and then spreads it on, and because they missed the message.
Oh my.
It would be really hard to catch. It'd be too slippery.
All right. But what
That's how you get away from the cops. All right, go ahead.
And that's kind of what gets into it, right? Like there's this message that some people pass on that has no meaning, has nothing behind it, right? Or it doesn't have a full bite. It's just kind of like, ha ha ha, this is our cool inside joke. No, it's not an inside joke. Everybody else knows what you're doing and thinks it's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the same thing when all these different MLMs, whether it's LuLaRoe or Beachbody or the pills ones, I can't remember all. There's so many MLMs out there, the jewelry ones, the candle ones, right? They all have these catchphrases that they use, and you realize like that doesn't mean anything. But it's a way to get someone motivated and get someone behind it to where I could see Mandy looking at this and saying, yeah, nothing is real. And then you start sitting there thinking like, well, I took a philosophy course and we talked about, what is reality and things can't exist without our acknowledgement of them existing.
Yeah.
So it can be appealing in a lot of ways for some people. Whereas if you get enough people to get behind it, there are going to be people that feel that something's wrong with them for not going along with it, to where they will, change. They will change their perspective on life, on family, on work, any number of things that they will change their perspective on because they believe, or they've gotten into a group that has gotten them to believe whatever this is, or they've gotten them to believe that if they don't conform to whatever this group feels is the right thing, that they are somehow going to be in the wrong. And I think that's one of the reasons why you have so many people that become in the political realm. You have some people that become so rabid about whatever political leader that they happen to follow, where it's kind of like, no, this is now my identity. If I strip this, I'm done. If I leave this cult, which, again, I've seen a good number of these things where people leave cults, and that is the biggest thing where they leave and they're like, well, what the hell do I do now? Yeah. This is where I had family. This is where I had belonging. This is what was real for me. Whereas people on the outside say, hey, that cult they weren't doing anything for you. It was all phony. They were lying. They were stealing money from you. They were committing all types of physical, sexual, mental, psychological assault on you. Yeah. But then you sit back as somebody who went through that and said, well, but I was actually happy there.
Yeah, I think that they tie this in at the very end. And again, I'm sorry for jumping to the end, but one thing that they talk about, that Mandy tells Sombra whenever she's basically like, yeah, you're a tulpa. We created you. She brings up the fact that the perfect vessel for the empty man, or, in the larger scheme of things, the perfect kind of quote unquote victim for the cult is someone who it's grief and fear and sadness. And I mean, that can go for anything cult related. That can go for, I feel like, without getting too political as I'm about to talk about politics, but that's something that I talk with my friends a whole lot about is on both sides of the aisle, where this rise in inflammatory rhetoric, where it comes from and why it's being used so much. And, I've had people in my own family who have fallen prey to right-wing kind of extremism. Mm-hmm. And it's because what they do is they say, this is what's going to happen to you. This is something you should fear. It's the whole idea that, whenever they're saying if Biden is elected, there are going to be riots in the streets. Nowhere is going to be safe. You remember those protests? It's going to be like that every day. So they instill this fear. It's fear. It's the world. It's everything external that you can't control. Right. But me, your leader, I can save you from this. And so it's the same thing. It's, we were joking around, I think off mic earlier, about everything is cyclical, technology, fashion, everything is cyclical. But that's one of the great things about humanity kind of as a species is we only have like a handful of tricks. And we use the same ones over and over throughout history. Right. And that's I don't think of politics anymore as politics. It's cult behavior on both sides. And it just breaks my heart because so many people are just so susceptible to it. And that's also why I find all these cult movies so fascinating. But kind of going back into this search through the Pontifex Institute. So he has this little conversation with Stephen Root, who's, as James said, doing his amazing ongoing character. I feel like the dude, he loses his stapler in Office Space, and then he absolutely loses his mind for the rest of his career. But he's Lasombra's going around and he's searching, trying to figure out what's going on, being a little bit of a sneaky private eye type. He meets some of my favorite characters in the whole movie, and it's the bald guys staring at the wall and whispering.
Right.
My note actually just says, "Bald dude staring." Yo. So
were you eating the same edibles as me while you were watching this, or
I was eating Empty Man edibles. That is for sure. I was like, what are they watching, man? It looks so great. And it's just a black wall. But he also happens upon what, looks to be some kind of a round, the horseshoe discussion where you have the group leader talking to a small group within the cult. And I turned on the subtitles to verify this. And so they're chanting, and what they're chanting is, from his thoughts come the dreams, from the dreams comes the power, from the power comes the bridge, from the bridge comes the man, from the man come his thoughts, and then on and on and on ad nauseum. And I think it was during that chant, for the very first time, on the second viewing, I kind of had my holy shit moment. Because, if by the end we find out that Lasombra is a tulpa, he's only 3 days old, which is a fun little, it takes the empty man 3 days to find you. So I kind of love that connection. But this idea that, from the bridge comes the man, and the first time we see who is going to be the new empty man, he is coming across a bridge. And so it's just signposted from the beginning and reiterated by this chanting. But I love it. They're legitimately trying to manifest a tulpa. Whether they do or not is kind of up in the air, based on a sequence we get later. But he then gets kicked out unceremoniously. He gets shoved, which isn't very nice. And then he meets the actor who played young Ned Stark.
Oh, damn it! You beat me to it.
Yeah, who I forgot his name. I'm just calling him Neil Cassidy because that's what Lasombra calls him. And Lasombra's, he's trying to be his buddy. He's like, yeah, this is where you'll probably find Amanda. This is what's going on. And that kind of gets us into our next big sequence, which I've called in my notes Camp Empty Man.
Wait, before we get to that, I would be remiss if I did not include this.
Okay,
because this was a question I had for both of you with, the whole cult. This isn't like, hey, have you ever been in a cult? Mm-hmm. Have you ever been in one of those situations where you invited to somebody's church or whatever? It was just so foreign to you where you're like, this is fucking weird. I need to get out of here. Like, how do I leave?
Mm-hmm. James, that's happened to me twice. And one time I went with a girlfriend to a church in Tennessee. Don't get me wrong. I'm from Oklahoma. I understand the aggressive South very well, but it was kind of right around the time. I think it was when Obama was in office, and Tennessee, of course, wasn't really happy about that. I'm not besmirching the entire state of Tennessee, just the Tennessee that I experienced at that time. And they actually had someone at the pulpit railing against President Obama. And I was in law school at the time, and I was also like, wait, isn't that how you lose your tax exempt status? But I remember everyone around me was eating it up. And all at once I was like, I gotta get the hell out of here. This is making me uncomfortable. But the other time, which is a little bit more explicit, is I went to a church that was very, very I don't know how to describe it. Whenever I say Pentecostal, you know how it's kind of like intense, like snakes speaking in tongues, stuff like that. It wasn't quite that level, but they were very intense. And we were having a small group, and someone came from outside of the church. And he was, in a very rough way. He was struggling with a whole lot of addiction and things like that. And all of a sudden, someone in our group goes, I can feel the enemy here. The enemy is in our presence.
Wow.
And he was dead serious. And I just remember having like a pit in my stomach and like like whenever you really, really get freaked out, you have the pit in your stomach, your face gets really cold for some reason. And I kind of got a little bit spacey, and I was just thinking like, I need to get out as fast. So those are my two weird culty experiences.
I can't compare to that.
You can adopt one of those if you want.
So there was this time I was at my church and I was like, that guy looks like he's the enemy. And so I pointed at Dylan.
It's dang it, you guys caught me.
And I was the guy who came in off the street.
Oh, I knew it. It's been here since the beginning.
Works. And now we've captured you again.
Okay.
No, I feel like people read my social media and they're like, oh, I can't bring that guy to my church. So that has never happened to me. So there you go.
Oh man.
What about you, Don? Did you have something?
I've had moments, right? And I've had a good number of moments. The two that come to mind are both my mom. So my mom, for some reason, when I was in high school, she got on like this really religious kick. So for me, it was, well, shit. I know my mom is working 2 jobs and she works a lot, but I know if she's working on a Sunday, we're not going to church. And if she works on a Saturday, if she doesn't wake up on time, we're not going to church. So that was my plan every Sunday morning. Just be quiet as hell. Like, don't make any noise. Don't do anything until it was like not, like 8:45, and then it's too late to go to 9 o'clock church or 10 o'clock church or whatever it was. Right. So I would do that. But during that period that she was kind of like, oh, we need to go to church more often. She took us to one of those churches that was in a strip mall. And this is nothing against it. I mean, against people who go to services like that. But I just got a weird feeling, right? So I'm like, what is going on? So we went in and we went through one door and then we went through another one. And it was kind of like what you're saying as far as like the ones, people speaking in tongues and doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was just so odd how everything was going on. And then this guy who they claimed was a prophet, they were looking, the minister, whoever it was like calling people from their chairs, because it was just basically folding chairs that were kind of in a semicircle. So there might have been like 100 people in there, if that, including the band, and called me up there. And I'm like pissed because I don't like church. I don't like any of that stuff. So my mom's like, going up there. I'm like, so I go up there and the guy like takes this anointing oil or whatever he claims it was. And I saw the bottle. It was regular ass cooking oil. So I'm like, what is going on here? So he takes puts it on my forehead. I'm thinking like, dude, I got acne. I really don't need any extra oil on my face. But I'm like, I'm so pissed. Like when I get really angry, I don't talk, but you can tell I'm not in a good mood. So he puts it on. He's like, oh, this young man, he's having problems with, he's so smart. He's going to go into engineering. I'm like, yeah, guess again. And then he keeps going on as if he's reading. He's like, oh, I see that you've got a lot of problems with your father. I'm like, I came to church with my mom. So it's obvious that my dad's not living with us.
Don't Miss Cleo me, dude. What are you doing here? So
I'm like, I think I called my dad the next day. And I was like, fuck, can I just go back to Catholic church with you? Because it's not as weird. So there was that moment, right? And then the other one is kind of like the same thing with the guy that you were talking about was railing about politics. One thing that people need to talk about within Black churches is the rampant homophobia that takes place, like bad, to the point where like, hey, you're going to come here, we're gonna cure it for you, right? So, I was at a service with a couple of people who were out, right? And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, because the minister then starts on, we need to cure people of having children out of wedlock. And I was like, how did your God get born? How did that happen? We need to cure people, because I'm the true blue cynical asshole when people start like talking about somebody's life or their orientation or anything like that. So he keeps going and he's like, He's like, oh, and we need to cure the lesbianism and the homosexuality. Men shouldn't be lying with other men. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at people that I've seen in the church. I'm like, why do you come here? Why do you come here? Like, this person is talking about you in a disparaging way.
Yeah.
I'm like, you should be offended, but I'm pissed off for you. The fact that you're here and allowing this person to say this. So it was just one of those things where I looked at him like, I don't go to these things for a reason.
Yeah, no, dude, that just as I'm at a church right now that I just love. It's accepting. It's actually doing what I think a church should do. But it makes me so mad sometimes thinking about how 90% of what people see about church, about faith, about anything is just it's the people that yell the loudest.
Right.
And it's so disheartening. And I mean, especially like thinking about your experience in the strip mall church, the Baby Billy church, as I would call it, if you watch The Righteous Gemstones. But you roll in there, and part of developing a good relation. I mean, it's something that the cult in this movie does better than that church. They ease you in. They don't, and I'm not knocking, some of the stuff that the Pentecostal church does, like speaking in tongues and being slain in the spirit and stuff like that. I'm not talking trash on it, but like, you got to give people a runway,
right,
to determine if that's something that's going to be fulfilling for them. You don't just say, all right, hi, welcome to the church. Hold these snakes. If you're faithful, they won't bite you.
I'm fucked.
I feel like, and it's something that the church has suffered from for a long time. And I feel like the church as a whole just needs a much better PR team, and a much better HR department. But, that kind of brings us really well back to the cult idea. And what we see in this movie is you see this first part where he's being slowly introduced into the cult, where he's given the questionnaire when Stephen Root goes out there and does the wonderful dog and pony show before passing around the metaphorical tithing plates. But then he leaves and he kind of goes and he sees what the next levels are. And it's weird to him. It's foreign to him. But I feel like for someone like Mandy and for some members, the people in the gray suits who are stomping their feet as they're clapping, it's not weird to them because they've been bathed in the Crisco cooking oil, as it were, for a much longer time. But no, that's an amazing question. That's a great thing to bring up.
Well, and I brought up because that was all I thought during that scene was, one, he's an outsider, right? Even though he's come back according to Stephen Root's character, but he's also from San Francisco, so he understands how all this works.
I love how many times he says that. I love it.
So many.
He's like, I get it. I'm from San Francisco. I'm originally from San Francisco. I'm like, wait a second.
You know how I know he's not? Because he always says the name of the city. And no one who lives there says the name of the city. They just say the city. Say the city, you say the Bay. Sometimes you say NorCal. Yeah. Like, never happening. Nobody says it unless you say Frisco. And then someone will correct you and say San Francisco.
Right.
I take it you guys are you Stephen King fans?
Yeah.
I want to clear something up.
I've heard of him.
He's an up and coming author. He set a couple books. Most recently, he set The Outsider in Oklahoma. And I just want to make it abundantly clear to anyone listening: we do not call Oklahoma City Oak City. We never have. We never will.
God.
I don't know why pilots do it as well. We are either OKC, or if you're not from Oklahoma City, it's much like San Francisco, the city. But for some reason, everyone has it in their minds that we call our capital Oak City.
That's weird.
Why would I lived in Oklahoma for maybe 6 weeks when I was stationed at Fort Sill.
Is there anywhere you have not lived? I swear I could play bingo. I'm going to get a map and re-listen to our episodes and find a state you haven't lived in.
I've told you I lived there for about 6 weeks, 2 months when I was stationed there. Continue. But yeah, even then I was like, I never heard anybody refer to it as anything other than OKC or Oklahoma City.
Yep. By the way, when were you
City?
Yeah, when were you down in Fort Sill, by the way?
2006, February and March.
I was born and raised in Lawton, and so I was there. I was in Lawton at the same time, so we may have passed one another in Central Mall. You never know.
No, I remember it. I remember Don was out on the street, and then he came into the church.
It's all a great binding nothingness, people. That's what we're trying to tell you. But so he gets kicked out, and he gets intel from Ned Stark, and he goes to Camp Empty Man, and he happens upon two different cabins. He does a little Watergate cosplay. He finds some files on all of the missing youths. And he also finds a red file on himself, and the file is empty, which I thought was a fun little touch because he is also empty. The second cabin, I don't know if this was like explicitly shown or if I was just watching it way too closely, but so that second cabin was the cabin that they mentioned in the Wikipedia article about the Institute where like the occult experiment went wrong, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing is, first of all, that manifestation video was the absolute that he finds in the second cabin is absolutely insane. And then I loved the reveal while he was watching the manifestation tape that the manifestation tape was filmed in the cabin where he was watching it. And there's something that was a little bit unclear to me, and I want to know what you guys thought of it. So was he painting with his own blood? Is that what we're supposed to believe?
I hope it was his blood.
Okay, because
it was black and white, so you couldn't really.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out. It looked almost like he had this doesn't make any sense medically, but it looked like his guts were hanging out and he was playing around in them and then painting the walls. Like, I could not figure out what was going on in that video. Can you make heads or tails of it?
I couldn't. It was one of those things where he was reaching down, so I couldn't. Like I said, I'm hoping it was blood as opposed to. James, you worked at a psych hospital, so you know all the things that people could use to paint with.
Oh yes, I'm well schooled in those, and yeah, no, I that's what I thought it was the blood. So yeah, yeah. I don't know. I got nothing else. I thought I had something and I don't. So there you go.
Well, he watches the tape, the manifestation tape. He sees the painting that is in some fluid on the wall. And I'm only bringing this up because it comes into play later. He looks over and there is like this raggedy ass teddy bear that is in the cabin. I'm 100% convinced that in that first shot we see of the teddy bear, it moves its head a little bit. I don't know if I'm crazy, but go back and watch it if you think I might be onto something. I think the bear moves a tiny bit, and then of course Lasombra looks away and he looks back and the bear is gone. I wonder where it went. We'll find out later. So he leaves this cabin and happens upon my favorite scene in the movie, the fire ritual cult stuff. So he happens upon all of these. They're presumed to be cultists. Otherwise, I don't know why they would be doing this. They're running around the fire, a giant fire pit outside, and they're chanting. And the fire just starts growing and going up into the sky. And it's just this weird, crazy, I don't even know what's going on. Maybe it's a hallucination, maybe not. And then all of a sudden, everyone stops chanting, which they do that a couple times. That is so effective. Such an effective use of sound in this. But once everything stops and then, the chanting quiets down, and they're still running around in circles, Lasombra walks away. And then he hears them like stop moving or stop chanting or something. And he turns around and voila, my favorite scene. He is looking at them and they're completely still staring at him from the other side of the field. And then he takes a step back and they take a step forward. And then one thing that Lasombra does so well in this movie and so much is he reacts the way I think most people would react. And when these people do this, he goes, yeah, no. And then he runs off. I texted James because I paused the movie
because I was laughing so hard at that part. I paused it, texted him, and I was like, I said, I don't know where this came from, but the whole no had me like about to fall out of my chair laughing.
Yep.
Because that was what I was thinking the entire time he was walking around this cult campground. I was like, no, you need to stop. You need to stop. And then he finally gets that signal, that sign that, oh, maybe I went a little too far.
Yeah. Yeah. He has like another just hilarious line, and a couple scenes later when he has Ned Stark, and when he holds the gun to his head, he goes, "You say something that makes sense." It's just so good. And we'll get to that one in a second. But so he has the files with him when he leaves after the cult does its weird cult chasing stuff. And this is the point where he goes back and he talks to his friend, I guess, at the PD. And the PD's like, I need to figure out if you screwed this case up, beyond all recognition by this point. We also find out that there was an affair between Lasombra and Nora, who is Mandy's mom, and that they were taking it down to Bonetown whenever the car accident took place. So there's a lot of guilt there, which, as we find out later, is important for an empty man to have guilt and fear. But there's something that happens a couple of times, and before we kind of get to the big last act, I want to talk about it. We see the same shot multiple times, and it's the shot where Lasombra opens up his cabinet, his mirror, and we have the medication very clearly displayed, and then the wedding ring very clearly displayed. And then, we always see him look at the wedding ring, but then take the medication, look at the wedding ring, take the medication. But then this last time, he looks at the wedding ring and the medication and decides he's not going to take the medication. He's going to put the wedding ring on instead. And I was just wondering, I mean, the shot, it was, it's like in poetry where if you repeat the same thing over and over, it's because you want it to be, it's emphasized. You want people to draw their attention to it. But so what did you all make of that? Like, it's almost like there's like it's a binary choice. It's like you either take your medicine and quote unquote get better, or you accept your loss. Or, I mean, what did you guys take from that?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for me. It's a different type of medicine to me, I guess. It's kind of like I guess the best way I can say what I felt from it was what will help you right now. That's the choice you're making. Yeah. And not that it'll actually help you, but what you think will help you. And so that's kind of where I was with it. What about you, Don?
No, roughly the same thing, because when you're making that conscious choice to follow your psychiatrist or your psychologist, advice, and then take the medication, sometimes that does make you deal with it. So now deal with it, but I guess a little bit dulled when you're dealing with whatever that trauma is. Whereas without that medication, you got to face up to what had taken place, to what guilt you might have associated with it. So I saw it as him like fully taking advantage of, I'm going to face this. The guilt I have is justified. And I don't want to, I guess, dull my senses or numb myself to what had taken place. And if I got this ring, like if I see this ring on my finger, I'm going to be reminded of what took place, what I'm missing, and what I missed out on, or what I possibly was responsible for.
Mm-hmm. I love both of those takes. That's why I asked you all, because I didn't have as intelligent as a take as either of those. And again, this movie, it's like it's unnecessarily good with the way it layers stuff like that. Like we said earlier, this could have just been a throwaway, a supernatural killer stalking kids, but it goes that next level, and that's one of the main reasons why I love it. But we first meet the location of the end of the movie, and it's a hospital that looks eerily like the main building for Scientologists. I don't know if you all watched that documentary.
No, but that's what I thought he was going into at first when I saw the outside.
It's a full on hospital / Scientology / cult building. We go in there and we find out a character who we find out later is Paul that I just referred to in my notes as Coma Daddy. Coma Daddy is in there. He is in a coma, and there are people visiting him, and they're all bowing, and they're all worshiping him. And so we, much like Lasombra, are like, what the hell's going on here? Let's find out what's going on later. He proceeds to follow Ned Stark, Neil Cassidy, and he catches him. He grabs him whenever he is out of sight of all of his friends. And he maces him, he handcuffs him, kind of extreme sort of stuff. Again, when you couple that with the fact he's interfering with the police investigation, I'm just sitting here counting up the felonies and misdemeanors. He pulls him out of the car. He pulls a gun on him. And first of all, I love the makeup work that they did on this kid by making his eyes so red. It makes him look just manic and evil, and it's great. This is where we first get mention of the prophet of the other. He talks about Coma Daddy being a kind of antenna, an antenna, a prophet of the other, the between one. And it's around this point during both my first watch and my second watch that I'm trying to figure out, okay, so the rag man is not the empty man, because then he says he needs an empty man to be a bridge to the rest of the world. And again, we have our bridge metaphor, or our bridge language. And so Lasombra leaves Ned Stark laughing. He doesn't kill him. He does the right thing. He only assaults him aggressively. And he leaves and starts doing some more research. Finds out that I think the most recent empty man is Manifestation 14. I couldn't figure out if he was Manifestation 14 or if Paul was.
Okay.
Did you all figure that out?
No.
Well, we find out that when he's going through these files that they have everything on him. They have everything about his wife, about his upbringing. There's even a great shot that's about growing up in San Francisco. And so you're finding out that they have this little goodie box, this Manifestation 14 goodie box that basically is everything about this guy. Because it turns out that we find out shortly after this, they manifested him pretty much by getting all of this stuff about him or about the person they wanted to manifest, and they just focused intently on it, which is also an amazing way to study that I wish I would have thought about before I finished school. I probably would have done better. But they're sitting there and they're concentrating intently, and they're manifesting this guy who has these specific characteristics. And I just love how we're kind of given these little morsels about tulpas and about manifestation, and then it's like we're not given everything at once. This film is drawn out in such a way that it kind of lets us figure it out ahead of time and then have our suspicions confirmed. And those suspicions are finally confirmed in this finale scene. So he, with this new information that he has, Lasombra goes to the hospital, and he talks with a very chatty nurse. Turns out Coma Daddy is stable, but he's been in the ICU, which is very uncommon. He's been hospital jumping for, I think, 23 years. 25 years. I can't remember the exact date, but we know that it matches up to whenever Paul took his tumble and did bad things at the beginning of the movie. So since then, this guy who we don't know yet has been jumping back and forth from hospital to hospital to hospital. We find out all this information in what I think is the most egregious violation of HIPAA that I have ever seen. But it turns out Amanda is there. Finally, we find her, and she is visiting and shaving Coma Daddy. And lo and behold, we see something familiar. We see an earring hidden in his beard that is soon revealed as the hair goes away. Turns out, that's right, everybody. This was Paul all along. Paul is the current empty man. We find out that they've been trying to find ways to have empty men. Apparently, there was one empty man that lasted like 500 years. I want a movie about that guy. But Paul, since he took a tumble and met the skeleton, he has been basically the antenna for this other entity. He has been the empty man that is needed to be a bridge to the rest of the world, as Ned Stark tells us. So what Amanda pretty much does is she gives us that classic end of the movie. This is everything that happened. And explains to him that they, in fact, had manifested him. He was born 3 days ago. So he was literally born when we met him in the movie, Lasombra, that is. He came across the bridge, and that was pretty much the first time he existed in the world. For us, we see a couple of times just these great pictures of him sitting naked in a chair, big Westworld vibes. I love that. So I'm assuming they manifest him. He shows up like the Terminator, the T-1000, and then they clothe him and they say, "All right, go and do whatever it is you got to do, and then you're going to be our new empty man." But he is kind of freaking out about everything that's going on. Obviously, he's told that he's a tulpa, that he doesn't have any actual memories. And so he calls Nora, and he's like, "Nora, I found your daughter. Also, she's kind of crazy." And Nora pulls the classic new phone who dis. "I don't know who you are. You have the wrong number. I'm sorry." And then after that, we get this great hallucination. It's like a deja vu party. He returns to Pontifex, where he kind of folds back over on his timeline, and there's an indication that the entity that was being manifested, that he was witnessing, was actually himself somehow in another timeline. We're back in the room with the Westworld chair, where we can only assume he was actually manifested. We're back at the skeleton itself, and then we have, I think, my second favorite scene. I can't keep track of my scene favorites. My second favorite scene, it's the scene with this big bad entity, and it's chasing Lasombra. The Ragman is chasing Lasombra. It turns out, I guess those weren't necessarily rags; they were tentacles, because he's just an H.P. Lovecraft looking thing, and he is then holding down Lasombra and fully transferring his essence into Lasombra. And then the hallucination is, as it ends, he opens a door and boom, he's right back in the hospital. He pulls out a gun and we get some pretty epic headshots on our boy Paul, like excessive and epic headshots onto Paul, and the blood splatter is just it's perfectly placed and looks eerily similar to what we saw on the manifestation tape in the cabin. And then all of a sudden he walks out. The movie's over, because turns out they have a new empty man that they created. And everyone in the creepy Scientology hospital that cares not for HIPAA bows down to their new leader. And I bow down to one of my favorite horror movies of the last 5 years.
Nice.
Those scenes were just beautifully shot, especially like even the transition from the Ragman into Lasombra's body was done so well, to where I honestly I couldn't take my eyes off, even to write notes as I was watching that part. And I wasn't expecting him to take out Paul the way that he did.
Oh yeah, I
was expecting, like, I don't know, maybe something to the effect of the someone goes in and pulls the plug, or he's watching and he sees Paul like pass on or something. But I didn't realize that I actually needed the scene to be that violent. I needed it to be violent because, you're cutting off that antenna, because now you're the upgrade. You're the new one. And what was
so I'm just imagining that's what my iPhone does to my old iPhone whenever I upgrade.
Well, that is what Apple does. They But I definitely, the one thing I did write down at this point was that identity is crafted by others. Yeah. So you have a role in playing, what you want to be, right?
Yeah.
But what other people see, I mean, this goes back to the whole reality discussion that takes place early in the film. But what other people see about you is the identity that's crafted for the world. You have an identity that you craft for yourself and feel as though that's how you are seen. where, you have a good number of people who are disconnected from the identity that people have applied to them and the identity that they have crafted for themselves, to where they say like, oh, I'm a great person, I'm this. And then somebody, you have a good number of people say like, no, you're actually a horrible person. Like, you kick puppies and you do, any number of things. And they'll say like, oh, well, I never noticed the puppies before or whatever, or, the puppy was in my way. So, it's interesting how you see how his identity, or his new identity, an emerging one, gets crafted, and he has to now abide by that identity. I mean, it's literally forced upon him.
No, I was just thinking when you were saying that, the whole pulling the plug thing, I had totally forgotten until legitimately this moment that they for some reason make it a big deal. When Lysombra's asking our chatty nurse about, is it weird that a stable patient is in ICU? Because the nurse makes it a point to say, no, he's not on life support, he's stable. Right. So it's almost like, he can't just walk in and pull the plug. He's got to do something aggressive. Right. And I definitely prefer this to just like the pillow on the face thing.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was saying.
That's overdone. I want you to shoot him in the head twice. Please do it. And he does.
Yeah, he emptied the clip in him.
Yeah, that's it was a real, he had the gun with Ned, he didn't use it. He had the gun with this rag entity, and he didn't use it, and he finally gets to use it. It's literally almost a Chekhov's gun situation, almost, but not quite. It was pulled off the mantle and used as it should be, and it's to shoot Coma Daddy. But I mean, was this the first time you guys had seen it?
Yeah, it was for me. I don't know, James.
Yep. And this is a safe space, okay? So don't feel like you have to lie to me. People lie to me all the time, and I hate it. What did you all think about it? Did you like it?
Wait, in fairness, you're an attorney. Like, people are supposed to lie to you.
That's true. They lie to me all the time. But and so in other words, I'm used to it. Yeah, it's like I'm used to it. And so I feel I value you. I trust you all more. I value you all more than those other folks. And so you can tell me.
All right, counselor. I plead the fifth. No, I'm just kidding.
He took my answer. Damn it.
I had to beat you to it, dude.
A wise man once said that if you're innocent, you don't need to take the fifth.
Well, I know. Tell that to a certain other individual in his entire family. All right. So here's what I thought about it, right? I've gotten accustomed to shorter horror films. So like 80 to 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. Is where I'm like, that's like the sweet spot, right? So the only complaint I have about this film is there are parts that you could have shortened. I mean, because of redundancy and things like that, where it could have been shortened to, maybe 90 minutes for the film, but then again, since you got two separate things, you got a short film and you got the long film, you could honestly break it up that way to where I'm going to watch this part. I'll take a break. I'll go back and watch the rest of the film or the bulk of the film. And you've got your 90 minutes. You got your roughly, an hour, maybe an hour 40 of the film, because you don't have to watch that first part. I'm sorry, you don't have to watch the second part directly after the first part, because you're going to forget so much about the short film version, short film part, to where it's not going to disturb your viewing at all. Because as I watched, I eventually got used to, okay, well, that's just backstory into some being that was here. Okay, cool. And then when you watch and you get to the part, you're like, oh my God, this actually carried over. It had something more to deal with this. So this could be seen as, the Empty Man 1, the Empty Man, 2, to where you do have movies that have sequels that call back to the original or call back to, other parts of films or other, TV shows and things like that. But no, as far as the storytelling, I liked it. I liked the way that you were able to use several of the performances and then totally disconnect this guy from everything that he associated with what was reality.
Yeah.
All right, my answer. I think we all know where this is going. Again, my attention span makes it very hard for me to like slow movies to begin with. I love the concept overall, And I feel like while I understand why everything's there, it was like too much for me and too slow. And so I didn't love it. But listening to Don right now, I was thinking about Fear Street when it dropped on Netflix. And I actually think that would have been a cool way to explore this. Fear Street did the 3 movies back to back, week after week, and they're all like an hour or whatever it is. Feel free to send me hate mail because I don't know times off the top of my head. But I think that'd be a cool way to do this. Like, you could have stretched out the beginning into a fully cohesive story, then hit the second part all about the main guy, and then the third part, like, really, like, you could end that second part hitting the cult, right? Like when he meets Stephen Root, and then the third one would explore this part. And I think that would be cool because everything is so pushed on this 3-day thing. And by the way, Jesus wrote us after 30 days. I get it.
Ham-fisted.
But like, I feel like if you're gonna go that far, let's go an extra mile. Let's beat people over the head and do 3 fucking parts, but not full movies. And that's what I like about the Fear Street theory is you would have these pieces and it would have dropped and people could have talked about each one and then the next one would drop. And that would in turn also make the manifestation and the constant obsession. And as I'm talking about this, I feel like they really missed a great marketing opportunity.
Yeah.
With that said,
day 1, day 2, day 3.
Yeah. But with that said, according to my Twitter, people bow to this movie like crazy. So I think they did all right.
So I actually have, I did a little bit of background research. My background research, I mean, like La Sombra level background research. I just got on Wikipedia. And
I
there
thought you were going to
is,
say you chased people down and pepper sprayed them.
yeah, I pepper sprayed a whole bunch of people that wrote about this movie. No, but
my eyes are still burning.
There are a couple of different aspects of this movie and the marketing and the actual filming and release that really, really kind of inform these issues, I think, that this movie has. And first of all, the COVID pandemic, it really screwed things up. So this movie was originally supposed to be released in early 2020, but it had to be pushed because, theaters were closing. 20th Century Fox didn't want to lose a whole bunch of money. So then it ended up getting pushed to October 23rd, 2020. So that's like, I don't feel like anyone was going to the theaters at that point. They actually ended up having to release it to VOD pretty fast, and it underperformed there too because there was no marketing. But as far as the actual film itself and the continuity issues and the length, so there's this info on Wikipedia. When test screenings occurred, I'm just reading from the page. When test screenings occurred, Pryor, the director, was told to assemble a cut almost immediately after production had ended. Following low test scores, the studio began panicking over losing a tax rebate because they filmed in South Africa due to impending deadlines. The producers assembled their own 90-minute version of the film, which tested even worse. This led Pryor to delivering his final cut of the film with 6 extra minutes that he initially intended to cut out. So it seems like this movie was like almost forced out. It was delayed and it just had a whole bunch of problems. But I, as much as I love this movie, and I do, I will watch this movie again and again and again. I still completely agree with both of you. One of the weird things, and Dylan Black, who I told you recommended this movie, that's one of kind of the selling points for him. Is he said, you thought this movie was going to be like the Bye Bye Man or whatever it was called, or the Slender Man, or all that, and no, it's actually a 2-hour and 16-minute movie about existential dread that basically contains a short film in the first 20 minutes. And so, with that, I'm like, okay, I'm sold. I'm here. And a lot of the appeal for me is just the chances that it took. And not all of them landed, but the ones that did, I feel like landed right in that sweet spot. But, one thing that I always think about at the end of a movie that I like is there anything else that's like this or something similar that I could watch? And I made a little list If you all are into it, or if the listeners are into it.
See, no segue at all. He's got it.
if there's,
I know,
if there's
that
something,
was beautiful.
oh, thank you, man.
You
If
should
you
just
like,
know that that my double feature is going to be The Night House. So when you steal it in a second, I was going to say that. All right, go ahead.
I'm not going to steal it. I'm not even going to tell you if it was on my list. So here are the movies that are not The Night House that you should watch. So The Void is on Shudder. It's much more body horror, but a very similar creepy cult sort of vibe. The Lodge as well is so good. I accidentally watched that and loved it. I got a lot of It Follows vibes as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you all haven't seen It Follows, check it out. And also a movie that I watched in preparation of Josh's podcast, Nashville, California, called Broadcast Signal Intrusion, which was very good. And I, much like with Empty Man, I had no reference for it, no marketing, nothing. And it's a really good it's a slow burn noir, not straight up horror, more thriller. But I also couldn't help but think of two television shows, since we're binge culture now. If you'd like this, I highly recommend you watch Archive 81 on Netflix. And I highly recommend you watch what I'm convinced is one of the best shows on TV right now, and it's Servant on Apple TV+. Servant goes unnecessarily hard, and I love it. And I'm actually going to watch this week's episode after we record this podcast.
Nice.
But guys, this was fun. I like this.
Excellent. So now this is the part where Don gets to give us 228 movies.
No,
that are not The Night House.
25 now because he took some of mine. So anyway, I'm going to start off with The Night House.
I'm fine. Then I'm going to throw out they look like people.
All right, go, James.
No, I just did that because I knew it would be on your list and I had to be an asshole. All right, go ahead.
All right. Of the 254 movies I have, I'm going to go with, to go along with this one, if this is whetting your appetite for something else, for something that's like The Empty Man or in the same vein, The Ritual, One Bedroom, Malignant, despite James's feelings on it, I would still recommend it. Shutter Island, It Comes at Night, Hereditary, The Lie, His House, Host, surprisingly, Becky,
Nice.
The Belko Experiment, Cam. There's still another one of James's favorites, Mortuary Collection,
Beautiful movie.
Beetlejuice, and Urban Legends.
Oh, Urban Legends. I also want to say, Don, there is a hill. If you look out your window right now, and that hill is Malignant, and I will die on that hill with you. Because Gabriel is an angel, James.
Uh-huh. Anyway, so I watched Basket Case, and so I don't need anything else in my life.
Oh my God.
Tune in when we start our new podcast where it's just me picking movies to fight with Don over and be a dick about it. It's going to be great.
What's the first movie going to be? Spice World?
Stir of Echoes, baby. I will fight. Stir of Echoes is better than that M. Night whatever thing that happened. No, Stir of Echoes all day. That'll be our first episode. It'll be great.
That's a good fight. I mean, that's a good movie.
Never mention The Happening. What's wrong with you?
Why would I mention The Happening?
He just did. All right. Anyway. So let's bring it back to you, Dylan. Where can people find you on social media and buy your book collection? Yes, your entire book collection is
all of it.
Where can they buy your collection of stories and anything else you have going on, man?
So right now, I am on, I say right now like I'm not perpetually, I'm on Instagram and Twitter as at Dylan Erwin, but it's spelled cool. It's I think it's DYLNRWN. I took out the vowels except for Y because as we know, that is only sometimes a vowel. And you can buy my work. I have two different pieces o media out. If you're in the mood to read, Echoes from the Fringe Volume 1, my short story collection, is available on Amazon, both physical copies and Kindle. I think it's actually on Kindle Unlimited, so you can actually read it for free. But also my big pandemic project that my wife and I worked on together, and I wrote a whole bunch of music for, and did some voice acting stuff. It's called the Nightgate Journal. And that is for sale for, I think, 99 cents or choose your own price on my Bandcamp. It's just dylanderwin.bandcamp.com. I'm not looking to make any money off of that one, guys. Any money that is raised through purchases, I'm donating it directly to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Awesome.
And so it's we during the pandemic, we kind of forget that there's another pandemic going around, especially with our young kids and with our teens. And so any purchases, any price you pick, 100% of those proceeds are going to be donated. And so I hope you like it. I hope you, if you listen to it, I hope you like it. If you don't listen to it, I hope that you, I don't know, like whatever else it is you're doing. But if you follow me on social media, I promise to make the worst jokes possible.
That's hard competition these days, but
It really is.
challenge accepted. All right. So I guess that wraps it up for another week. So thank you very much for being here, man.
Oh,
Yes,
thank you
definitely.
so much.
And as always, I'm James Sabata
And yeah, I'm here too.
for now. And we'll see you next week here at thenecronomicon.com.